What's up, everybody, and welcome to the Tactical Chinwag podcast. I'm your host, Luke Jillings, aka Original Human, and today we are joined by the amazing world record breaker, Jim Galvin. How you doing, mate?
I'm very well, buddy. I'm very well. Thank you for the complimentary intro. How are you?
I'm all right, man. It's been a long time since we've chatted.
It has.
It's been a
It has.
long time. For those of you who don't know, me and Jim were in training together in the Royal Marines at CTC, at the lovely CTC, and went through some very difficult yet fun times together.
That's true, yeah. Poetic licensing. I think you might be one of the only people who's ever called CTC lovely.
Yeah.
But yeah, I appreciate the sentiment. I'm sure they do as well.
So, how's things? What have you been up to?
Things are good, bro. Things are good. What have I been up to? Well, I work in the fitness industry, as I'm sure you know. So I run a couple of different fitness kind of clubs, as it were. So obviously, COVID has been an interesting time for me. I'm probably like, getting loads of people together in a small space sweating is kind of the antithesis of what any government wants. So it's been an interesting time, but it's kind of forced us to be creative. We're kind of back to normal now, but overall this year it's been fun in a weird kind of way. I think I spoke to a few people who have kind of said the same thing and had the same sentiment about different lockdown periods. That it's kind of forced you into a time of self-reflection and creativity. And for me personally, it's been quite enjoyable actually.
Yeah, but it does really challenge your kind of way of thinking when it comes to the fitness industry, and it really kind of broadens your possibilities of making workouts for people and circuits for people. You've really got to think outside the box, like literally, because you got to keep 6 foot away from each other. So, yeah, that's pretty cool. So since you left the Marines, you've been up to some pretty incredible things, and I can see is that actually behind you? Is that one of the world record titles behind you? Is it?
That is, yeah. I just realised how unbelievably showy it is now that's this sort of thing casually in the background. It does actually live there. It's not just there for the podcast today.
I love it, mate.
But yeah, thank you, mate. And that was actually done in an attempt to raise some money for a military charity, a charity called Rock to Recovery, which is a charity that was founded by a guy called Jason Fox. So I know a lot of your listeners and subscribers are American, but for anyone in the UK, that's Jason Fox, Foxy from SAS Who Dares Wins. Yep. That's his charity. So it was raising some money for those, and it was a team of 12 of us that attempted to kind of basically deadlift was the chosen event, but lift the most amount of weight that 12 people could lift in 12 hours. So we kind of arranged how it would rotate. So there's one barbell, it's 105 kilos in the bar, and then effectively we just kept rotating around in our team of 12 for 12 hours. It's a long day.
12 straight hours of deadlifts, mate.
12 straight hours of deadlifts. I mean, we arranged to have a couple of 60-minute breaks in there, but I think the way that we arrange the teams is there's about 3 or 4 hours on, 1 hour off or something for the duration. But yeah,
wow,
it's pretty intense.
That sounds intense. How was your back after that?
Mate, I tell you what, my back was actually okay. My hamstrings were about, I think they're still there in Newcastle where I did it actually. I don't think I've got them back in the last 2 years. I think they're still stranded up in the north.
That's incredible.
Yeah, definitely the hammies. That's where it hit.
That is absolutely incredible. That's an amazing achievement. So are you actually in the book when you can you open the book and be like, is that something that happens? I don't really know how these world record breaking things work.
The funny thing is, mate, 100% honesty, I don't know. I haven't actually.
Oh, you don't know?
So I don't know. I think I'm so lazy. I'm like, I can't bother to go through 800 pages of these things. So I'll just trust that we're in there. But I got the certificate. That's enough for me. It's all
Yeah, that's good enough for you.
Happy with that.
That's incredible, mate. Well, yeah, congrats for doing that.
Thanks,
that's
buddy.
genuinely incredible.
Thank you very much.
So the reason I wanted to get you on this podcast is I have an ungodly amount of people, usually young lads, sometimes young girls now, which is amazing as well, who want to join the Royal Marines. It's not always the Royal Marines. Sometimes it's the Paras or the US Marines or whatever. I have an ungodly amount of people messaging me. So I thought, you know what? I did it. I got my Green Beret, but you are the person I think of when I think of pinnacle fitness in the Royal Marines. You are one of the people in there, just to kind of boost you up a little bit there, right?
That's a huge compliment. Thank you.
Yeah, no worries. And I thought it would be absolutely perfect to get you on and get your perspective on young people joining the military in general, not just the Royal Marines, but the military in general. It's kind of because I do have some US lads on here as well and girls who want to join. So give me your perspective on the fitness industry when you're young and how vulnerable you are, because sometimes you're kind of perceptive to some things that aren't necessarily correct, and how much different it actually is compared to what people think it is when it comes to getting fit for the military.
Yeah, good question. I mean, I think one thing that we'll look at and we'll address straight away is that prepping for the military is very different in one kind of singularity element than training for any other sport, whether you're a CrossFitter, a sprinter, an American football player, a soccer player, rugby, whatever it may be. Training for the military, or especially not necessarily on the run up, but when you're in military training, the kind of the singular difference is you're not really in control of any of the lifestyle factors that you would be if you're an athlete. If you're an athlete, you get to control how much you sleep and maintaining a good kind of sleep and rest and recovery pattern. You get to control your nutrition. You get to control a lot of the other training variables. Whereas when you're in the military, you're effectively training to be in a position where you're not in control of any of those. Does that make sense? So
yeah,
it's that in itself is one kind of huge thing. I think one of the other difficult things is that military style fitness can be very old school and is kind of, a good couple of generations behind. I mean, for us, we were kind of in training 10, 12 years ago. So yeah. I assume, and I know because I coach a lot of guys for the Royal Marines now, I've got 4 or 5 guys in Livingston at the moment, and I've got a few guys in different units, and they said it has progressed a lot, but there is still very much kind of a culture in the military, and it may well be the same in the US of, well, just get up, just run, just do it, just live, just do it. And there's very little kind of science or kind of smart approach to it. So what I would say to anybody that is looking to join the military is try, considering you're in that environment where you don't get to control your lifestyle factors, whenever you are either on base or you're kind of in the run up, make sure you approach it in as much of a scientific way as you can. Do the things that enhance recovery. I noticed that we're both definitely a fan of ice baths and cold water immersion. Right. So I saw that you've done that recently. So that can help. Foam rolling is absolutely huge. Making sure that you eat right is huge. Because otherwise we could 100% get kind of lost in the woods, and I hope that you have me back on and that we can get into more of kind of the minutiae detail at a later date. But I'd say speaking in generalities, get the foundations right. I'd say that is the most important thing. Make sure that your nutrition is good enough. Make sure that you've got a lot of clean fruit and veg in your system. Make sure that you recover well. Make sure that you are stretching. Like tendons and ligament injuries are probably, if not the highest, then in the top 3 reasons why people get injured on the run up to military stuff. It's not necessarily muscle pulls or anything else. It's kind of connective tissue. So, keep those nice and strong. So just the foundations are kind of known. Stretch, roll out, good quality nutrition, get as much sleep as you can when you can, because as soon as you start training or you're in a unit, then it's a different ballgame, and that's something you're not necessarily going to be in control of. Yeah,
you're definitely not going to get much sleep. It's as if you've got to prepare for the unexpected and I know that's kind of like an ironic, like everyone says that with the military, but fitness-wise, and when it comes to your to your body and to like every single muscle in your body, you really have to prepare for things that you don't expect. You can't prepare to do a regain.
Exactly.
You can do certain, you can do pull-ups and you can do hip flexing exercises, but you can't really prep for something like that, especially when it's cold, it's wet, you feel crappy, so it is definitely really it's kind of simple in a way, but also technical in a sense that you can still optimize your body in a way, but also in a way that I don't know how to explain it, but gets you in the position where you really can do anything you can get up and you can just run with a small warm-up, because this warm-ups aren't really anything when you're in training. I remember before the endurance course, we did like a couple of runs in a circle, couple of punches in the air.
That's it.
That's
it. 2 minutes, right? You're ready.
Yeah. Okay, line up, guys. You go, and then you got that anxiety when you're lining up, ready to do the endurance course. So I get that. It's kind of a strange position to be in, where again, when you're training for for a marathon, you've got like a set schedule. You're not really having to worry about things outside of the box, are you? You kind of just in that same program through in and throughout. But when it comes to the military, it's so varied. You're doing exercises that are really old.
Yeah,
that's as well as
and again, that's it. And again, it's kind of it really is about speaking in generalities, building that foundation that does prep for you to turn up to the start line on a certain day of training and say, and to hear, right, guys, we want you to do this, and you're like, okay, even though I've never done it, I've got the foundations of strength, I've got the foundations of aerobic capacity, I've got the foundations of being mobile enough to be able to approach that and probably stay safe and stay efficient. So that's what it is. It really is that kind of that absolute, really, really broad foundation, and then just have a strong enough mind that you can kind of crack on from there. And injury proofing yourself is huge. That's the thing. It's like so many people that fail on the fitness test, as you'll remember from training. It's, they roll on their ankle and they snap something, and it's like, if you can do the prehab, which is all the the different stretches, the different mobility, the different strengthening work before you get injured and need to do rehab, then the chances are you're stacking the deck in your favor then.
Yeah, it seems like you get to a point in Royal Marines training where it isn't about the state of mind, it isn't about your fitness, it's about luck with injury. That's what it seems like at a certain point of training, about probably like week 23 or something, or at that point you're probably going to pass out as long as you don't have an injury. So it is a case of strictly injury prevention and trying to prevent them, little niggles that you get, because everyone gets niggles, everyone gets that little sore hip, everyone gets them blisters, but it's how you deal with them. So for someone who's in training, in the mix of it right now, is listening to this, what would you say that you could do with the small amount of room that you've got? Remember, you've got your bed, and then you've got 2 foot between your bed and your locker. And then you've got your bed that's only 5.5, 6 foot. Yeah. What would you say to them lads who are like, oh, I've got this bit of a niggle, or what would you say in that position?
I'd say you need to 100% maximize all the things that. What I tell them to do is kind of keep this mental narrative of an athlete that is training for the marathon, training for the Olympics, training for whatever. They've got these different lifestyle factors and these different things that they do, and that they, these different drills that they go through on a day-to-day basis. What you've got to think is, if you're in the mix and you're in training and anything now, you have to think, if you're on camp and you're in that time where you are actually, that smaller period of time where you are in control of those variables, you need to maximize that time as much as you can. And that would be foam rolling. For me, is absolutely massive. So good, and be quite intuitive with it. If something feels tight, that's the area you need to foam roll. So have a kind of a general strict procedure. I always stretch I always mobilize my shoulders. I always, stretch my hamstrings. I always do some hip work. But then on top of that, what feels the most sore, and then stretch that out. If you can, any soft tissue release at a higher level, so in form kind of a massage, if you do get a weekend off, is absolutely huge. And then just try, for me, one thing that I always kind of cheekily did, because I'm not actually sure we were supposed to do it in training, was I was basically triple dosing multivitamins. So because the quality of the food that you get in kind of ration packs and stuff is a bit rubbish. You probably get enough protein, you probably get enough carbs from it because it's super high sugar. But in terms of the micronutrients, the things that keep your immune system strong, the things that stop you going man down when you're in the cold, the things that stop you getting an infection when you're licking the same spoon as everyone else, and all the stuff that is proper primal situations. Multivitamins are probably the best thing you can do. So if you get a really, really good quality whole food multivitamin, that's one little kind of golden nugget that I really reckon kind of kept me kind of injury free and kept me on top form throughout training and throughout my time in a unit, actually.
Yeah, and speaking of nutrition, the nutrition in training is bad. There isn't. I mean, you've got the naffy, you've got Dutchies, you've got your 9 o'clockers curry that's from leftover from the day before. It's not the best food, and you really do. A lot of people say to me as well, oh, what should I be eating? What should I be doing? And honestly, there's so many different avenues you can go down. I'm sure you know that. I ate pretty much anything when I was a kid because I was so young and small and I was growing. So for someone who, who's young, it is a case of just eating whatever you want, right? I mean, and to an extent, obviously, but when you're growing, it's eating whatever you want. So when it comes to the average Joe who's oh, what should I do about my diet? Knowing that you're gonna go into training and the diet's probably gonna be the least important thing on your day. It's just a case of eating when you can, eat quickly as well. What would you say to the guys that are talking diet and worried about the diet, or who think that they need to diet because they have to lose a few pounds and stuff like that? What would you say in that position?
I think so. I mean, there's a couple of different kind of avenues that you could go down in terms of if there's a fork in the road. I think the amount of training that you're doing, you are right, and the main priority is just that you need adequate fuel, as in you literally need enough calories to get you through, because it is so challenging. During test week, I think they feed you something 6,000 calories a day, and it's expected that you'll lose weight. That as an example for those of you that are thinking about joining the Royal Marines specifically, that kind of last week, well, before King Squad, so kind of week 31 or whatever, 6,000 calories a day plus, and you're expected, and pretty much everyone loses weight. That's a demonstrable of how much activity and kind of how much energy you're expending. But I think both, again, like if you're in the mix, then during those condensed time windows where you do get to control your diet a little more, it makes it even more important to make sure that you get enough, multivitamins for me are a huge thing. And in preparation for, if you're not in training yet, but you're kind of on the run up, multivitamins, another thing that I'm a huge, massive advocate of and have been probably for the last kind of 18 months, 2 years, is bone broth. So there's a lot of data that's coming out now that says because obviously you break down muscle tissue if you're doing a 30 miler, if you're doing a 12 miler, if you're doing a soul course, if you're doing a gym session, whatever you're doing, you're breaking down these muscle tissues, right, in your body. And what we need to do is consume the right stuff to rebuild those. And there's a lot of data that's coming out now saying, kind of going back to like caveman times, we wouldn't have just eaten a steak or a fillet of fish or a chicken breast, right? We wouldn't have just eaten the flesh. We would have eaten literally bloody everything we could, pretty much from nose to tail, everything we could. And that includes things like bone broth that actually help keep your bones strong and repair, as we were saying earlier, things like tendons and ligaments, much, much, much better than just the tissue itself. So as two, again, like it's such an expansive topic, but if there were like two like takeaways for anyone that's kind of on the run up, that's like, how can I, during times between field exercises and stuff, how can I really maximize my recovery? Multivitamins is one, bone broth is another.
Yeah, and I think the bone broth hit because obviously I don't eat meat or anything anymore, but it sparks this memory in my mind of when we were on Survival X, and you have these rabbits and you have these chickens, and it's not a case of you kill them and you just take the meat and cook it. You kill them and you obviously you gut it, but there's certain things you take from the chickens. There's like pre-made eggs that aren't fully formed yet you can eat. You throw it all in a little tin, you boil it, you drink that water, which in itself, even though it's got everything in it, is bone broth. And it kind of brings it back to that kind of survival instinct, but in a way our bodies are kind of made for that. Our bodies are...
That's 100%, that's it.
I know although we don't need it anymore to kind of live, if you want to be optimized in a way where you can do anything in a survival situation, you need to be taking this type of nutrition. You need to be learning about this stuff.
Yeah, that's it. And military training does simulate putting you in that real primal situation where you are in freezing cold temperatures, where you are cold and wet, where you are awake for potentially 19, 20 hours a day, which is unlike anything that you get in the modern Western world. So it makes sense that if we almost put ourselves in, military training does kind of simulate that old caveman style lifestyle, right? Yeah. So it makes sense that it'll be like, right, well, what did they get to survive? So it's like, well, do you need a multivitamin? Do you need bone broth? Do you need to foam roll? Do you need to just survive? Maybe not. But if you want to optimize, if you just want to get through military training by the skin of your teeth, do what you want. But for those of you that are listening, and you'll know if this is you, if you want to optimize, if you want to be the best possible and stack, build the best possible foundation, stack the deck of odds in your favor maximally as much as you possibly can, then it makes sense that you look for these tiny little golden tweaks, these small big things, these small changes that make a big difference to your lifestyle, to your recovery, to your performance, to your health and longevity, and to your likelihood of actually passing training and passing it well.
Yeah, and I can vouch for that, because I would say in training, I was one of the mediocre fitness guys. I was the one that was just getting through it. I was never at the top. I was never right at the bottom. I was just kind of floating through. And I think a lot of that goes with, I had to get a lot of nutrition in training because I was so young and so small. But I was also, that nutrition I was dumping in my body was not good. Like, I would go to the NAFI, I would get chocolate, I would drink energy. And a lot of people would do it. But, energy drinks and stuff. There is options there for fruit and veg. There is options when you're in the galley to have clean cereal that's I think they had all brand. I think they had oats, didn't they, as well? They had bananas. You could get your fruit and veg. But most people like me, who was young and didn't know anything about nutrition, we really didn't. And it wasn't really big when you were thinking about getting in the Marines at 16-year-old. I was just going, I was having chips and sandwiches and just, all sorts of with horrible margarine on all of it. That's like dreadful for you. I mean, I still
And
did
I
it,
think
but
most people did exactly that. I think most people
yeah,
did exactly that. I think it was,
yeah,
and again, it's almost, it doesn't have to be, they don't have to be mutually exclusive. Like
right,
if you just come back from a field exercise, you go to 9 o'clock because you want to go to Dutchie's for a burger because you're
yes,
like, you've lost about 6 kilos.
yeah,
Go to bloody Dutchie's, have a bloody burger. Like,
yeah,
make sure that you replenish those energy stores, right? Get that
right,
fuel in, but then literally just pop a multivitamin as well. So it's like, so it's not I'm not suggesting that you avoid those super high calorific
yeah,
foods. I'm not suggesting you avoid that. A lot of the time, that's what you need. You need adequate fuel.
yeah,
All I'm suggesting is you can do both. And luckily, things like bone broth in a little bit of hot water or something and neck it like a cup of
yeah,
tea, um, and a multivitamin, they're actually super
yeah,
easy to take. It's not something you have to like force yourself to do. Multivitamin,
right,
there's a little bag with like 5 or 6 different tablets in. Neck it back with a bone broth, and it's done. It takes 2 minutes. So
yeah,
something like that, it's not a big sacrifice, and it almost means that when you do, have the chips, it means when you have the bread, it means when you have a Dutchies and a burger and a hot dog or whatever. All it means is that you don't become deficient in these vitamins. So
yeah.
it just kind of it keeps you at that level playing field and keeps your immune system strong, your nervous system strong, your reflexes sharper, everything else like that.
Yeah, and for those people who are thinking of or are close to getting into training, you do have time on the weekend to get into Exeter and to get these
Mm-hmm.
multivitamins. There is places you can go, you can find this and search it out. I'm sure there's other lads in your troop that probably want to do the same thing, and you can all go together and buy whatever you can in bulk or whatever, and work together and kind of push each other up. Because I know in training you have this habit of like there's a lot of banter and there's a lot of digging at each other, but there's also this primal kind of love for each other where you want to help each other out. And I think mentioning this stuff to your friends who maybe is 16 and doesn't know much about nutrition and being like, hey, let's go and get some multivitamins, it's probably going to do you the world of good. But I think that would be nice as along and get you kind of more integrated in your troop as well. Because being part of the troop and not just being the grey man, but also really being part of the troop is a side of being happy, keeping your training team happy, and with happiness comes more positive mindset and more better workouts. Really, if you get down to bottom field and you're happy that morning, you're probably going to work out better.
100%. That's exactly
Yeah,
right. And again, again kind of reverts back to what we were saying earlier, which is like you can just grit your teeth and bear it and
yeah,
hate every second of it and get through, or you can actually, take the best of it and you can optimize yourself in that position.
yeah,
And training is one of those things where it's like it will be probably one of the hardest, but also one of the best times of your life. And it's like you want to have your brain actually working for those times so that you can enjoy that experience with your friends because it might be one
yeah.
of the best things you've ever done.
Yeah, I think and to kind of go on a sidetrack from that as well. When it comes to your mindset and kind of being positive and using these things to your best of your ability, a lot of people always have questions to me about resilience and kind of being positive in such a negative kind of space. When you're cold, when you're wet. I remember on my 17th birthday being on Woodbury Common on Century, 2 in the morning. I don't know whether I was in your troop with this one, but it was raining so much. There was Dutch Marines on Woodbury Common and they got airlifted out. I don't know whether this was with your troop
Wow.
or not.
Okay.
And I was on
Wow.
Century on my 17th birthday, sat there, just
That is
like
just
feeling
brutal.
feeling sorry for myself, thinking my brother's out right now in town in Manchester. But some people come to me and they're like, oh, you're just really determined, And I'm sure people say the same thing to you as well. Like, oh, how do you get that mindset? How do you kind of push through these hard times? And I think personally, that's also kind of like a muscle, like that resilience, that kind of determination and grit that you have to get through these dark times is just like a muscle. And have you experienced the same thing?
1,000,000%. I think and I think they've articulated it so well there. The resilience, again, like saying it's like a muscle, it's exactly the same as any other almost like fitness ability in that it is susceptible to training
Yeah,
and that it will improve upon practice. So it is almost like you wouldn't just turn up on the day of an ultra marathon and expect your body to be able to hold up with that. We don't just expect to be, to go straight from Civvy Street to test week and be able to be resilient enough to handle yourself at a 30 miler. So it is, and Royal Marine training is structured in a way that what you need to be resilient to is increasing each day, each week, and it does build that muscle and it develops. You develop that ability to stay resilient. And I think one thing that really helped for me is regardless of century, regardless of whether or not it's a bottom field exercise or someone's lost their ear defenders. Hands up, I did that once at an exercise and everyone got beasted for it. Sorry, anyone in 975, my bad, love you. If anyone's still threaders about it 12 years later. But all of these things, all of these beast things, every single thing that happens to you, and one thing that you develop in the military, far more so than you ever will in civvy street, is realizing that when you're at rock bottom and you're in this pain hole, it will end.
Yeah.
And it was almost like you just develop that narrative. It will end. You're cold on sentry. The hour that you're on sentry for, it will end. If you're doing a night exercise, the sun will come up and thaw out your frozen hands. You're in the sea, you're doing something, you will get out. It will end. You don't know when, but you know it will. And it's almost like, it sounds kind of a bit of a cliche and a bit of a random message, but it is true. And you start to develop an appreciation for the fact that everything, regardless of how painful, regardless of how cold, regardless of how wet, regardless of how miserable it might be, it's always temporary. It's always temporary. And I think that's that kind of having that mantra, that kind of clicked for me about halfway through training, and it did make things easier.
Yeah, I think the one thing that I kept telling myself is, even though the training team are hammering us, like, then they don't want to hurt us. That was the thing that I always thought. They don't want to hurt you. They want to improve your resilience. They want to make you stronger and better people. They don't want to hurt you. So if they see that the troop is getting to a point of no return, they're going to stop whatever you're doing. They're going to move on. They're going to change things up and change the exercise up a little bit. So just work hard, try and stay with the team. Know that it is going to end, and know that it's not going to get to a point where you're going to get hurt, because the training team are there to look after you, not just hammer you. And I think that's a really important. A lot of people kind of forget that in training. They think that it's you versus the training team to get your green beret at some point. But they're trying to help you out. They want you to be the best possible soldier possible, because you're going to go to a unit possibly with them or their friends. So they want you to, be next to them and be happy with what they did and understand why they beasted you and know why they've done it so that you can improve and be a better soldier. So with that being said, even though when you're training at home, you take that aspect out, you take the aspect of it's going to end soon, it's going to, someone else can decide when it ends from there. You're on your own. It's you and your own brain doing going for a run, doing an ice bath or whatever. What are your kind of go-to exercises when it comes to, and I don't just mean exercises like, I'm talking like ice baths or whatever, everything. What are your go-to things when it comes to trying to improve that little bit of resilience and that little bit of determination?
I think training-wise for me, there's one thing that holds true, and that is that speed work is actually a lot harder and breaks your soul a lot more than what's called steady state. So if you were going to go for a 60-minute run, steady state would be your heart rate's at a certain level because you're running at a certain speed, or you're rowing at a certain speed, or you're cycling at a certain speed, and then you keep that level, you keep that speed on the machine, you keep running heart rates at the same level for an extended period of time. That's what's called steady state activity. Interval training, when you really hit speed stuff, is the thing that actually, in my opinion, both sucks more, but it does get results, right? So this is what actually all the physiological, we won't get kind of lost in the woods of the science, all the physiological adaptations of that particular training method is what works. This is why when you go to CTC, they do like speed stuff in the gym. They then get you to do camp circuits on bottom field. They get you to, right, to that tree, back to me.
Pace to be a winner.
Spike your heart rate. Pace to be a winner, right? Exactly that.
Yeah.
And considering my background before was sprinting, I was like, I better bloody win this because my endurance is terrible. So I was like, if I'm still in after round 3, I'm going to become last. But for me, that's one thing that I try to. What I try to do is throughout kind of the course of a week, I try to have a couple of different sessions where I'm like, right, let's focus on, if I'm doing like a metcon, like a metabolic conditioning, so like a cardio session, I'm like, right, I'll be on the assault bike or the rower, and I'll be like, right, I'll do like a 30-second sprint and then a minute off and then 30-second sprint. And the next session, I'll be like, right, I'll do a 90-second one. And then the next one, I'll do like a 3-minute one. And then I go back down to 30 seconds. So try and alternate, try and vary the amount of time that you're really like going full guns blazing for. I think regardless of the movement, squats, burpees, press ups, runs, whatever, I think if we kind of, put all the exercises in one box and just park that for a minute, I think that way of varying that particular training methodology, that's the thing that will will give you a really, really good kind of base foundation for moving on to everything. If you can make your body move quickly for 30 seconds or 90 seconds or 3 minutes or 5 minutes or whatever it is, and have any kind of ability there, that's great. Whereas if you only do steady state, if someone's like, right, to that tree, back to me, you're going to come last if you only know how to hold a certain pace for an hour.
I can vouch for that. I can vouch for that. That's happened to, I was last on them so many times. So many times I would be the last person on Face to Be a Winner. You could tell they're all like, oh my God, it's Jillings again. He's last on Face to Be a Winner. Because it just wasn't, I was okay at yomping. Yomping I wasn't too bad at. But Pace to Be a Winner, oh my days. Especially up hills, it's my weak spot. And I can, it's just not my cup of tea, mate. And I can vouch for what you're saying. Like, it's not so much the, it's not so much fitness at this point, is it? It's more like mindset of like I've done sprints before, so I know I can do this. And for me, it was like I already had this mindset of I'm not good at sprints. So when it came to that, I'm like, oh, here we go. I'm going to be last again. And I think that in itself was what got me to be last most times on Pace to Be a Winner.
Yeah, a bit of a self-fulfilling prophecy. If you've already got that narrative, you'll live up to exactly that. If you're like, I'm not actually that good at sprints, then you'll perform not being very good at sprints.
Exactly. So. Definitely be looking at the roads near you, looking at lampposts and be like, okay, I'm going to sprint between lampposts. That's what I like to do these days. I like to, the different lampposts, and every one I'll sprint and then take a, jog the next one, then sprint the next one, jog and just not stop. And it sucks. It really sucks. Sometimes your sprint is like your starting jog. But it sucks, and you just gotta push through it. And there's
but
also
it works, right? It does work.
It works. It works wonders, because then you get back and you feel like Superman at the end of the day. You feel if you set yourself small goals. I have a little whiteboard here, you can't see it, with a bunch of short, medium, and long goals. And if you make them short goals, kind of in a distance where you can achieve it, it's just a case of turning up. It's a case of turning up on a regular basis, and you can achieve it. Then that gives you a confidence boost to get past the medium goals. And then when you turn up and you put that even more effort in, before you know it, you're reaching these long-term goals, and you're like, I'm ready for training. I'm ready for CTC. Yeah. I'm ready for that first week in foundation, and we're gonna smash it. So one last thing I wanted to talk about. We've got 15 minutes left, and I kind of wanted to bring this up as like a suggestion. You're a fitness guru. I'm kind of not. I got through training. I'm not a fitness guru. I kind of want to make a thing where we get you on multiple occasions. We go over all different types of fitness exercises specific to training, specific to, different maybe, paras or Marines or US Marines. We bring you on board. We talk about, the requirements to get in. And then we go over what you could start with. How can you start getting fit for this thing? So I wanted to throw this out. Royal Marines training, you've got what? 60 press-ups, 2 minutes. 80 sit-ups, 2 minutes. You've got your 3 miles in about 23, 24 minutes altogether, and if you think about it. And then you've got your pull-ups. You got to do clean about 5, 6, 7 pull-ups clean, really, aren't you? But it's not.
Yeah, I think that's about right. It goes up to 15, but I think 5 or 6 is
5 or 6 is fine. And exactly. They do it on like a point system. So if you get only like 45 press-ups, but you do really well on pull-ups, it kind of levels out in the point system. Yeah, but for the people who are like, okay, today's the day I am starting. It's the Royal Marines. I've picked it. Where do they start? And we're gonna do this when we have you on multiple times. We're gonna do this for different branches. Okay.
Good question. I think with that, kind of ironically with what we've just said about different speed work, I think that it's the combination, especially for the mile and a half. It depends. There's a level of like self-awareness you've got to have, right? So if someone is like amazing at bodyweight exercises, but they're crap at running, then they'll know that they'll be like, I'll be honest, that's kind of already tied up in the bag, but I'm rubbish at this, and vice versa. Someone might be like, I'm an absolute racing snake naturally, 5-minute miles easy in my sleep, but I'm rubbish at this. So one thing I would say to everyone out there that's listening to this is kind of self-reflect and think which of those two, the aerobic capacity or the body weight stuff, do you think you're weakest in? And then try and have like a bit of a sliding scale in the amount of time you spend on each component. Does that make sense? As opposed to just assuming that everyone needs to spend 50-50 on each. But in terms of the running, I would say vary. Do like session on, session off of some kind of interval sprints, like the lamppost stuff, the hill stuff that you were saying. One session of sprint 80 meters, like sprint up to a lamppost, walk back slowly. Sprint up to the lamppost, walk back slowly, and do 20 of those or something. So one interval session and then one steady state session.
Yeah.
So that will build a great foundation of kind of cardio and just allow that curve to kind of to keep improving. And then for the bodyweight stuff, it is just getting the volume in. So press ups, just get the volume in with press ups. Sit ups, just get the volume in with sit ups. And depending on your pull ups, it's like a threshold. If you can do more than, so this is for me with my clients personally, both those that have joined the military and those that aren't. If they can do more than about 6 pull ups, then we just get them to keep doing pull ups. If they can do less than 6 pull ups, then one of the things we do is we get them to do some kind of progression. So normally band assisted. So it's like if you're up, you've got a pull up bar, you lanyard a resistance band, you put it down under your feet, and effectively what the band does is it pulls you up, right? So you're not lifting your entire body weight, you're probably lifting anywhere between 5 and 15 kilos less, depending on what band you use. And then you get, higher volume in with those, if that makes sense. But so the body weight stuff, just get the volume in and make sure that you find an appropriate way to do that. And with the cardio, so the 1.5 mile or 3 mile run, the way that we do it, alternate between speed interval work and steady state.
Cool. So that is your kind of rundown on where you would target someone joining the Royal Marines. And does this vary? Would you say this varies with age? For me, this was 16, and I'm trying to build muscle, trying to kind of get my fitness up from a child's perspective, really, because you're still a child at 16, really, and you're trying to get your fitness into an adult world. Compared to some people who join and they're like 29, 30-year-old.
True.
And their body's kind of like up there and it's kind of starting to be at its peak, and you need to kind of raise the game even more. Would you say there's any variance when it comes to them 2 different ages?
Yeah, I would. And I'd say that the older that you are, generally, so you've always got to imagine when you're young, you're floppy, right? You're like jelly. You're like a rubber duck, which might sound weak. I remember hearing this in Foundation. Every Royal Marine should be like a rubber duck. And we were all like,
yeah,
bloody hell, like a rubber duck. It's like the least manly thing in the world. What's this flipping bloke on about? And he basically said, it's like chuck you out of a building, kick you, you get run over by a car, you just spring back up and do exactly the same shape. And we're like, okay. So that's what the young guys are like, right? So they might not be that physically or structurally strong, but they're kind of robust in that their recovery period is like 30 seconds, right? So that's what it would be like when you're 16. Whereas the older guys are a lot more solid. They're generally a lot stronger. But also with that kind of that strength and that solidity, their body's a little bit more like concrete, which means if they're more likely to roll their ankle and tear something, whereas the younger guys are more likely to roll their ankle and just get straight back up. So the older that you are, you're a lot more solid, which means you're a lot stronger in structure. But if something does go wrong, the chance is more likely to result in an injury. So I'd say the younger guys just keep smart with the prehab stuff, and the older guys, I'd say stretching and the mobility work is even more important. Probably if you're over the age of about 24, 25, that's when stretching is not a suggestion anymore for you. Like that's something you got to start taking seriously. Yeah. And in your brain, it's not if I've got time, it's a non-negotiable. And when you go into training, those 2 different things, man, you've got to put them in. You've got to be very, very smart with what you put in each list. But the non-negotiables, stretching and mobility is one when you starting to get into your late 20s.
Yeah, and I think that goes for anyone late 20. I would say from 25 onwards, 24 onwards, really prioritize that stretching. I found when I left the Royal Marines, I was in a bit of a dark state and I put a bunch of weight on and I was in a horrible place. And then I slowly started to get my fitness up again, and I would always do my 3 mile and I'd get it in like 25, 26 minutes. That was like my happy range where I'm not super fit. I was just kind of plodding through life. 25, 26 minutes. And then my wife introduced me to yoga, and literally within like a week or 2, it shedded like 2 minutes off that time. And the only thing that changed, my diet didn't change, my workouts didn't change, nothing. The only thing that changed was the yoga. And that was it. And it was because of the stretch. And I just never stretched. It's just one of them things where you think, I don't need to stretch. I'll just do a couple hamstring stretches when I finish my run, and I'm fine. I can crack on with my day. But the truth of the matter is, not only is it good for injury prevention, but it also helps your mobility when it comes to your stride and all these different variables that you don't even think about when you're in Royal Marine training, because all you're trying to think about is, I'm trying to keep my shins from exploding with shin splints with these rubber boots on, and you're trying to do this 6 mile speed match to get your cap comfort. That's all you're thinking. You're not thinking of the long-term game and your stride and the way that you're running. I remember when my fitness wasn't the best, I think it was like halfway through training, there was a guy that they sent me to see, and they always called him like this magician guy. I don't know if you remember who I'm talking about, And they always kind of refer to him as like this magician who kind of helps out with people who need the fitness help. And he just told me some basic stuff when it came to like the way that I run and the way that I conduct myself, with each stride and the way I look up and breathe. And I didn't even realize that, and it helped like way more than I would ever think. And it was simple things like conserving your energy, not swinging your arms too much if you don't need to, leaning forward as much as you can, and also kind of catching yourself with your feet. But all these things kind of went hand in hand with stretching. And before you knew it, like I took time off my 3-miler without really needing to put any more effort in apart from just chilling and stretching at night. That was it. Yeah. And I don't know. When did you like discover stretching? Is this something you've always known?
I think for me, I was probably a bit of an anomaly because I think a lot of guys that join the Royal Marines, they might come from football or rugby backgrounds, which are also kind of a lot more of a culture of we doing that for, just get on with it kind of thing. And that's very much what the military, especially the Royal Marines, was like, 10, 12 years ago. I think it's like the most kind of macho bravado environment. Whereas beforehand, I was a sprinter, which is very, very science-based, kind of very, very technical, very kind of, I get like science-based execution of a certain activity. So when I joined, I was making sure that I was stretching, that I wasn't really doing too much rolling, but I was doing like self-massage, like kind of, getting my thumbs into my own arms and legs and trying to kind of release the bits. And it was one of those things that, to be completely honest, everyone was like, what are you doing, mate? Like, it's a complete bloody waste of time. Just go down the naffy, get a flapjack. And then weeks
that was
later,
that was me.
Later,
that was me.
Yeah,
that's
where I know you from.
Yeah.
The flapjack guy.
Yeah.
And then kind of, and then weeks, a couple of months later, as we started to progress through training, and especially when we went from the gym, kind of, which is like whenever gym pass out is like week 9, week 10 or something.
Week 9,
and then you go into bottom field, and I'm just starting to kind of peg my way up. Not in kind of a cocky way, but this is literally what happens in terms of quantifiable rankings, kind of, go up in terms of the timings of the rankings of fitness, the fitness rankings in the troop. And that's when, it's all fun and games, and it's all fun to kind of, take the mick out the guy that's doing some self-care, right? That's actually looking after himself. It's all fun and games until he starts beating you.
Yeah, until he starts taking them strides.
Yeah, exactly. And then everyone's like, yeah, Jim, I know I was taking the piss and everything, but can you walk me through what exactly you're doing? And this is exactly what happened. Exactly what happened around about that time.
Yeah, it's funny how different training becomes when it comes to the fitness standards throughout the weeks. Like, you do start with this very kind of structural gym training before week 9, where it's very like, you're going to be very disciplined. You're running, you're sprinting to a certain spot, you're in a certain position, and literally as soon as you go into that gym, it's like that. It's like straight away to the point of you have to be on this spot with your arms exactly like this. Whereas as you go onto bottom field, like after week 9, it's like jog on the spot. Just don't stop. Just don't stop jogging on the spot. That's it. And then you're going to do this. You're going to do. It's not a case of what you doing with your arms. Obviously to a point of get your knees up. But other than that, like the type of fitness changes dramatically. And I think that's a perfect way of rounding back to exactly what we were saying at the start, where it's a case of your body needs to be able to get used to doing anything very quickly. It needs to adapt very quickly, because when you do that change, and it's literally, you do bottom field, you do gym pass out, the next day I'm pretty sure you're on bottom field practicing. You're on bottom field learning.
I think you're right.
Yeah.
I think it is literally the next day. Yeah.
Yeah, and you need to be like, okay, we're going from these thin ropes that you can get your hands all the way around to these thicker ropes that you can't really hold, the muddy, the wet, and now it's all about not just your grip strength, but also technique, a lot of technique. It's about being smart and kind of being aware while you're training, instead of just going in and kind of, a lot of people just kind of black out when they're doing the fitness things. It's like, just go in, they get their head down, they do it, you're done with. But when you get past week 9, then you need to start really thinking about technique, getting over them walls, going through the tunnels, doing a regain, doing a fireman's carry. How can I carry him properly? There's a lot more kind of thinking, and this is where I think the whole thinking soldier for the Royal Marines starts to kind of get in, doesn't it? It's where you really have to pick up your game a bit and be like, okay, not only am I tired and I'm cold and I'm wet and I'm exhausted and I want this training to be over with, but I also need to figure out, it's like a puzzle. I need to figure out what I'm doing, and I need to be on top of it. And I think that rounds up perfectly to what we were just saying at the very start of this about just being able to adapt.
Yeah, that's it, man. I think it is kind of that thing of, and looking back on it kind of in hindsight, in that situation where they're literally in your face screaming at your bottom field, and it is a complete maximum application of effort. Like you are literally going gung ho, but at the same time, you're still composed.
Yeah.
You don't lose that composure. So it's like you're in an incredibly overly stimulating environment where you've got people shouting at you, flipping, slinging mud at you. You've got somebody else on your back with both your rifles getting caked in mud. You got to go over. You got to chuck someone over a wall. You got to go through spike tubes. You got to do whatever. But there's a level of efficiency and composure that has to be partnered with that. You can't just you can't lose control.
Yeah.
And I think that's where that particular Royal Marine specific ability starts to be developed and nourished and built. Exactly as you said there, which is like you can't just kind of go mental and start flailing your limbs around. It's like it is maximum execution, but at the same time, you've still got to keep a level of calmness in your brain to make sure that you're doing everything right, because otherwise things get dangerous.
Yeah, you're very right. You're very right, and I think that's a perfect pointer to end on with when it comes to Royal Marine training. We've gone over, for people wanting to get into Royal Marines now, we've gone over exactly what you need to do if you're at the very start, depending on whatever age you're at, and what you need to do to prevent injury. We've gone over what it's like in training. We've gone over what nutrition's like in training. Now we've spoke about everyone else. Jim, I want to hear about you. What is your next? Before we leave, I want to know what your next world record breaking attempt is. What is it? What have we got? And if you don't have one, can we figure one out for you over the next couple of talks that we have?
Definitely a fan of that. So basically, the certificate in the background, that was for as a team of 12, as I said earlier, the most amount of weight that 12 people can deadlift in 12 hours. We also did a 24-hour attempt where we actually did, it was a dual world record attempt. We tried to break the most amount of weight that 12 people could lift in 1 hour and in 24. And it was like the first hour of the 24. Right. It was almost like we got a huge head start. Hour 2 was kind of almost a bit of a recovery. And then we kept going for 24. As luck would have it, we got given the 1 hour world record. We actually didn't get given the 24-hour world record. I won't get into why. It's loads of political rubbish.
Okay.
But it meant kind of after the first hour, the next kind of 23 were a bit redundant, unfortunately. But we're either going to go for that again, or I wouldn't mind doing a couple of solo ones. So I'll tell you what, let's collaborate there. Listen, you and me will have a chat. We'll get all the listeners involved.
Yeah.
We'll see whether or not. We'll see what suggestions come up of what I could do. But anything that is, ironically, as a sprinter, and for those of you that don't know, when I left, well, I don't even know if you and me have spoken about this, actually, when I left the Marines at the end of 2012, I was very, very lucky that I went straight into international sports. So I became a GB bobsleigh athlete for about 2.5 years. So that's like even more sprinting than sprinting. It's like even less bloody time. It's like 40 meters. It's like 6 seconds.
And you're pushing something.
And you're pushing a very heavy sled.
Yeah.
So even considering the fact that all of my stuff, sporting-wise, all my background sporting-wise, is very, very explosive, I absolutely love endurance attempts. And I think one of the reasons why I do quite well in those is exactly what we've been talking about throughout the whole of the last kind of 45 minutes or so, which is self-care.
Yeah.
Looking after yourself well, stretching between. You've got to know if you're working for an hour, then you get a 20-minute break. What do you do in that 20-minute break? And that structured self-care approach in anything from kind of 12 hours onwards is, I think, what allows me to perform kind of as well as people who are probably, completely honest, a lot fitter and stronger than I am. And I think that self-care thing is so important. I think that's exactly what we've been talking about with the guys that want to join the forces, and that's probably something I'll consider when I'm selecting my next world record, wherever that may be.
Yeah, well, whenever you do select it, let's try and figure out something with the channel where we can get the attempt on here. We can get people watching it, or maybe not only could we get the attempt on here, but we could do a podcast going over it. You know, like we could go deep. We'll talk about this after the podcast, but we got some good ideas, I'm sure.
Put some plans together.
Yeah, we'll put some plans together. So, thank you for joining. It's amazing. It's been over 45 minutes now, and it's absolutely flown by. Yeah, it's been an absolute pleasure. For people who are, want to find out more about yourself and your world record breaking, where can they find you? What you're doing next? Where's your social media and all that lot?
All my fitness stuff now is going on my personal social media, which is probably the best place to catch most of my stuff is on Instagram, at Jim H. Galvin. So JimHGalvin, at Jim H. Galvin. And seriously, if any of your guys have any questions about this stuff, they want anything cleared up, they want me to elaborate on any of these points, follow me on Instagram, send me a quick message, and I'll do my best to get back to you, because I absolutely have a passion for making sure that people that do want to join the military do it properly. and get the most out of it, and learn to live the best way, train the best way, recover the best way. So give me a follow, send me a message, and I'll try to get back to you.
Yeah, I'll also leave a link for that down below in the description on YouTube. So definitely go and check him out, because honestly, your Instagram is fire. Some of the fitness stuff you do on there is remarkable. Mate, I go on it all the time and I'm like, God, I wish I was this fit. Geez, like, what am I doing with my life? Meanwhile, I've got a kid in one arm, he's crying, and I'm like, why do I not have time to do this? No, I'm joking. But yeah, thank you so much for coming on. It's been an absolute pleasure, and we will get you on more often. And what we'll do next time is I'm going to get a bunch of questions from people who want to join the military, and I'm going to get them on here, and we'll get some questions answered. So thank you again for everyone watching, and I will see you in the next video. Take it easy, everyone. Goodbye.